Let's just paint a picture for a second. Imagine one single day, August 5th, 2025. You start seeing these headlines pop up. A trade war is getting hotter, wildfires are out of control, and major strikes are threatening to shut things down. Now, on their own, any one of these is a big deal. But when they all happen together, well, that paints a picture of a country facing some serious pressure from, well, pretty much everywhere. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll dig into the pressures coming from outside Canada's borders. Then we're going to turn inward and look at the crises that are building right at home. And finally, we'll connect all the dots to figure out what this perfect storm really means for the country's future. And that really brings us to the core question here. This isn't just about one problem. It's about what happens when everything hits the fan at the exact same time. It creates this incredibly complex national test, maybe one unlike any we've seen before. Okay, so first up, let's talk about that pressure from the outside. And to do that, we have to start with Canada's most important and honestly, most complicated relationship, the one with its neighbor to the south. Right now, the biggest flashpoint is a dispute over Canadian softwood lumber, and it is seriously escalating. The U.S. is basically accusing Canada of dumping. That's selling its lumber at prices that are unfairly low. And you can just feel the tension boiling over. And this isn't just tough talk. Nope. The U.S. has just slapped a massive 35% tariff on Canadian lumber. For an industry that's a true cornerstone of the Canadian economy, a number like that, wow, it's a huge blow. So what do? Well, Canada is forced to react. The government just announced a $1.2 billion, that's billion with a B, aid package to try and help its lumber sector weather the storm. It's a classic case of action and reaction, and it's all playing out right now. But, throwing money at the problem is playing defense. The real offense is diplomacy. And with all this pressure from the U.S., Canada is now looking to its other North American partner, Mexico, to try and form a united front. This is a really interesting move. Canada's top foreign affairs and finance ministers are down in Mexico City as we speak for a super important meeting. The goal here is to figure out a coordinated game plan to push back on these U.S. tariffs using the USMCA trade deal. And get this, Mexico actually managed to get a temporary break from some U.S. tariffs recently, so Canada's there trying to learn from their playbook. And you gotta remember, this whole lumber thing isn't happening in a vacuum. It's all happening as Canada's overall trade deficit, that just means it's importing more stuff than it's exporting, has ballooned to almost $6 billion. So that just adds another layer of stress to the whole economic picture. Okay, so that's the view from the outside. Now let's pivot. While Canada is fighting all these battles on the world stage, there is some serious pressure building up from the inside too. First step, an environmental emergency you can literally see and smell. We're talking about hundreds of wildfires burning across the country, especially in BC, Manitoba, and the Northwest Territories. And they are blanketing huge areas in smoke. And here's where a domestic crisis just explodes across the border. The smoke from these Canadian fires has drifted so far south that it's triggered air quality alerts for more than 81 million people in the United States. All of a sudden, a Canadian problem has become a North American public health emergency. And while the skies are literally filling with smoke, there's another kind of fire brewing on the ground. At the exact same time, major labor disputes are threatening to bring two of the nation's most critical services to a screeching halt. So you've got this two-front war on the labor side. Over at Canada Post, unionized workers just said no thanks to the final contract offer. That means your mail delivery across the entire country is now at risk. And then, at Air Canada, flight attendants are voting this week on a strike mandate. A yes vote could ground flights coast to coast. And look at how fast this could all go down. This isn't some far-off threat. The vote is happening this week. If it passes, the union can drop a 72-hour strike notice. That means the absolute earliest that a full travel shutdown could happen is August 16th. That's just a few days away. Okay, let's take a breath and zoom out for a second. We've got a trade war, we've got raging wildfires, and we've got major labor unrest all at once. So what happens when you connect these dots? What does this actually mean for the country? And this is really the heart of it, isn't it? Each one of these crises is a massive test for the country. On the world stage, it's a high-stakes battle to protect your economy from rising protectionism. At home, you're fighting a climate crisis that doesn't care about borders, and you're dealing with internal friction that could disrupt life for millions. There's no single government department that can solve all this. It's going to take a totally coordinated national response. So now that we get the pressures, where do we go from here? Let's look ahead. Here are the key things you're going to want to keep an eye on to see how all these stories play out. All right, so you've got 4 big plot lines that are about to unfold. On diplomacy, will this team up with Mexico actually work? On the labor front, can they cut a deal to keep the mail and the planes moving? And with the environment, can firefighters get these wildfires under control? The answer to each of those questions is going to tell us which way this whole thing turns. You know, at the end of the day, all that pressure from the outside really boils down to this one simple, stark reality. As a lot of analysts are pointing out, the government is being pushed into playing defense with its economy, just trying to protect struggling sectors in what's become a much more hostile world. So we end up right back where we started. When you see all of these different pressures converging on a country at the exact same time, it just forces you to ask a really fundamental question about the path forward. Is this the perfect storm that's pushing Canada into a true national crisis? Or is this the ultimate stress test that's going to reveal just how resilient the country really is?